Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. Thanks. That's different. Um, hey everyone. Hope everyone's having a good afternoon. I'm so excited to go ahead and welcome you to our fall 2024 community conversation. And I want to thank you all for joining us and start by acknowledging the fact that MCAD is located on the grounds of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people in Minnesota. And that wherever you are, that you are located on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of indigenous people. We need to acknowledge that these places have a complex and layered history. And in particular, for an institution like MCAD that's dedicated towards creativity, innovation, and empathy, we need to stay committed to ongoing efforts to recognize, support, and advocate for American Indian nations and peoples. I want to welcome staff and faculty. I want to welcome returning students and any of you that are new students in particular. Welcome to this remarkable event that we host at the start of every semester, our community conversations. We started the community conversations in the fall of 2024 when the full scope of the pandemic was really part of our significant reality, with the idea that we come together to hear from someone who provides us with keen insight into their world. That doesn't have to do with a specific pedagogy. It doesn't have to do with a specific community or a student organization, but rather that we have a chance to see how their ideas and their perspectives can influence our own work, our own teaching, the way we operate, the way we think, the way we mentor, the way we support, and really to see if that can spark some additional points of collaboration, points of discussion, and potential points of development for your own points, your own areas of inspiration. So I'll speak for a moment about the format here. We'll have our speaker provide some insights for about 15, 20 minutes or so, and then afterwards we'll be sitting down over here and engage in a conversation which we'll invite all of you to participate in with some of the questions that you have. So as things are coming to mind, please go ahead and jot down or remember the questions you have, and we'll do our best to get to them. And this leads us to our community conversation speaker today. Like I've said many times at this podium and in other places, MCAD's dedicated to educating the next generation of creative leaders. And we certainly see that in the work of our gifted faculty, our students, our alumni, and in our community. We see this as embodied by exceptional individuals throughout the world, which leads us to Bethany Iverson, alumni of MCAD in 2006. And she's someone that's really been a tireless advocate for looking at ways that we can create more equitable workplaces and spaces that really allow individuals not just to go ahead and progress, but to thrive. She's been a tireless advocate for equity, creativity, and communities of a whole variety of abilities. So, and she's also our neighbor down the street. So Bethany is an award-winning strategist and entrepreneur. She's co-founder of The Coven, a startup that's reshaping the future of work with an eye towards equity and belonging. She's been recognized by Inc. magazine and a Female Founder of the Year with the Beyond the Ordinary insights regularly featured in publications like Fortune, Forbes, and CNBC. Prior to starting The Coven, she spent 12 years in advertising and most recently as the head of the strategy discipline at Space 150. In addition to her degree here at MCAD, Bethany also holds a master's in rhetoric, scientific, and technological communication from the University of Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Bethany Iverson.
What's up, MCAD? How is everybody doing? Yes, let's go. Let me start my timer so I don't talk for 45 minutes. Most importantly, we are doing a giveaway. There are prizes if you made it to the auditorium today. So if you got a raffle ticket, that's great. And if you don't have one yet and you want the possibility of getting a free Coven membership for a year, please get yourself a raffle ticket. You can kind of wait and see how this presentation goes to decide if you're interested. That's totally fine. So we'll do that at the end. Okay. When Sanjeet invited me to give this talk, my first thought was I will finally get to use the report card I've been hanging on to since 1998. Yeah, finally. So glad. So I grew up in and around Milwaukee. I went to high school in a suburb out by my mom's house. Is anyone from Milwaukee in here? Make some. Yeah. Okay. So I went to a high school called Waukesha West. And as of my sophomore year, things were not going great. I was really struggling to break through to like the 2.0 GPA range. Grades were not a priority, but as my husband lovingly says, raves were. So I got feedback like needs to take school seriously, does not complete assignments, and then just shout out to my first period gym teacher who enjoyed having me in class, which is, I think, incredible because there was nothing like physical or educational that I was doing in that class. It was purely personality, I think is probably why I got that. But around this time, I had kind of like commandeered my dad's old Minolta single lens reflex camera. And it had like one of those great old rainbow straps. And I had started taking photos, and they weren't particularly good photos, but I had started carrying it around with me at school and carrying it around when I would hang out with friends. And as I started taking photos and taking a photography class, I developed a new curiosity, a little bit about the world, but largely about myself. And I started to think about who might I be other than a bystander of my life, which is kind of how I had approached living to that point, as I think probably many 15-year-olds do. So there was this question of could I intentionally become somebody that I liked, somebody that I respected? So in the year after that, I worked feverishly in my high school's dark room. I went to a public high school, but it had an awesome arts program. And so I spent a ton of time working in the dark room, taking photos. My high school photography teacher, who I'm still friends with, he would like begrudgingly write me passes when I would skip other classes to hang out in the dark room more. And I think he knew that I was running a scam, but he just went along with it. And it led to me participating in this pre-college photography program. I'm in here somewhere. I was going to try to like put an arrow. I just honestly, I couldn't find myself, but I'm in there somewhere. And so I enrolled in this pre-college photography program at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. And it was like a lightning rod moment for me. You know, I had found myself in a community of peers who cared about the same things. We just wanted to explore what could be. We wanted to make things and learn about different ways of seeing the world. And that was our only job for a couple months in one summer. That's all we had to do. And it was electrifying. It was an electrifying experience, and one that fundamentally changed the course of my life. I had a portfolio review with someone from MCAD at one of the review days at mcad, and they encouraged me to apply and to come to school here, and that's ultimately how I ended up in Minneapolis. So shout out to mcad. Okay. But I wasn't done with high school yet. So, as further evidence that art really does change everything, on my way out of high school, and I mean like on the last possible day of high school, I was recognized as Student of the Month by the art department. No one's gonna clap, that's okay. That's all right. Thanks, you guys. I would like to point out that it was not, you know, like the math department or the science department, but it was the art department. And this is really cool because 2 years prior, this would have been unfathomable, you know, for me. So this was not on my bingo card, but again, it kind of tipped me off to where my skills and my interests might best be applied. I even sold a piece of art to my school. My school library bought a photograph of mine for $50, which I'm almost certain I just flipped for a bag of weed immediately. But I was paid for my art for the first time before I ever left high school, which was, again, a validating experience that you don't maybe even realize that you need, but it kind of changes you in a way. So it was time to move up to MCAD. I came to Minneapolis literally by myself. I grew up in a really turbulent but super loving family, but they just didn't have the resources. So I was totally on my own, made my way to Minneapolis. It was really scary. It was unnerving leaving my community, my friends, my family, to come up here and just kind of like make my way in the world. And wouldn't you know it, very quickly, the same thing that happened at mcad happened here. I found myself in a community of peers. I was engaged. I was a straight A student. I really cared. I loved the work. I loved the process. I fell in love with that journey. I had to learn new words like studious and industrious to describe myself. And it was just wonderful. I thrived here because I really felt like I belonged. I don't know if you all have had the blow up. Uh, is that Godzilla? I don't know if you've had that again, but I would maybe just put in a word for it. It made for a great end of your barbecue. So I felt like my time here was transformative and magical in a way that it really felt like Hogwarts. Where in the outside world, I maybe didn't make sense to other people. I don't even know that I made sense to myself, but here something was different. And I've heard other friends who had graduated, like 300 years ago, like I did, but other friends who have kind of shared this same sentiment that there's just some magic that unfolds in a community like this that is really hard to replicate, and it's sometimes even hard to put your finger on. So before I left MCAD, and I want to call out that I stayed here for 4.5 years because I really didn't want to leave. I just did an extra semester, and my mom was definitely like, "What the fuck? You have to like get out of there." And I was like, "Well, just a little bit longer though." So before I left, a mentor of mine, Lester Shen, who you see pictured here, he was the chair of the, at the time was called Visualization, is now the Creative Entrepreneurship Program. He had kind of like quietly pulled me aside one day and said, "Hey, I think you should maybe apply to graduate school." Now, I didn't really know what graduate school was. I didn't really even know anybody who had ever been to graduate school. Like he had a PhD, and Kevin, you went to graduate school, but you were like maybe the only two people who I knew who had accomplished something like that. All I knew was that it was for smart people who were interested in learning, and I thought I actually am a smart person who's interested in learning. So I went to graduate school. I started working in advertising, in strategy. I worked at fantastic agencies in town like Space 150 and Call McVoy. And as I did that, I just kind of had this ever present nagging feeling that something was missing. And I was doing, by all measures, really well. I was having a lot of success. I was working my way up. I was making good connections and doing work that I felt proud of. But there was something that just felt like it was not there. And if I step back and really look at it, it was a sense of belonging that just kind of went away after I left MCAD, and I had sort of spent the next 10 or 12 years of my career trying to re-find and recapture that. I want to take a beat to just talk about belonging because we often will say things like, well, belonging, and everyone kind of nods, but I don't know that we're always really precise with what does belonging mean, and how do we know when it's there, and what would indicate that it's maybe missing. And so when I think about belonging, and this is because I'm a nerd who studies this stuff, that I made a pyramid about it. Belonging has kind of three key components. The first one is that you feel seen. So you feel acknowledged, your identity, something is understood about it. You don't have to spend a ton of time advocating and explaining who you are and why you have a right to exist. You're seen. The second is that you have potential and that you are reminded of your potential. Someone points it out to you that you have something that is worthwhile, that is exceptional in its own unique and brilliant way. And finally, that you're not alone, that you have companionship, support, the presence of others. You don't feel psychologically kind of out on your own or emotionally out on your own. So this idea that You're not solo in the world is a really important part of belonging. And when any one of these is missing, it creates really intense feelings of discomfort and feelings of kind of like unease. So, of course, I'm noticing that this feeling of belonging has gone missing. And I'm noticing that a lot of the people I work with and a lot of the people who work in the advertising industry feel the same. And so, as we start talking about it, and trying to understand, like, what does it take to create more belonging? And not surprisingly, some of the folks who didn't feel like they belonged are the people who have kind of historically been kept on the margins of working life altogether. So, women, people of color, anyone who is gender expansive, you get it. And it was very much, this feeling of something, again, this environment and this industry is fantastic for some people, but others really don't feel like they have a home here. And so I started writing about this and speaking about it more and collaborating with friends to talk about what we might do to increase feelings of belonging within the industry. This is a piece that I wrote for Ad Age about white supremacy. My boss, like, definitely flipped his shit when I wrote this, but it was important to talk about this, and it kind of went viral. I don't know, I don't really subscribe to that, but it was picked up. A lot of people talked about it, and it felt like there's something here. These conversations are really important to be having in workplace environments, and it's really important to confront these issues and do so in a way that brings people along rather than points fingers at them. So my friends and I, who all felt strongly about issues of inclusion and equity and belonging, we started organizing all of the presidents and the CEOs of the big agencies here in town. And these are, by and large, wonderful people who care very deeply about these kinds of issues. We would host events and put together programs. We were really trying to create systemic change. But the problem was that progress was slow and momentum would kind of halt when agencies would experience different business challenges, or they would get busy doing other things, and it just wasn't the priority that we felt it should be. Now, instead of kind of feeling like defeated by all of this, I felt fire, an intense fire. And so my three friends specifically, who I'll talk more about in just a minute, and myself, we started to dream about what a new world based on belonging might look like. We put together mood boards for a space that didn't exist yet. We dreamed about what it would feel like to walk into a place, a container where belonging was ever present, where people could just come in and be themselves, and that would be enough. Where you can take the armor of every day off and kind of ease your shoulders out of your ears. And so we started dreaming about what this space could be. We knew it had to be a physical space. At the time, we were all working in agencies. There was not like a work from home component to what we were doing. And so we just thought we want to create a container where people feel like they can really just be who they are. So, so then there were like a few real burn it down moments that I won't get into here, but just the kind of stuff that you expect, like, sexual harassment, all sorts of intimidation, just icky things that were happening in our workplaces to us. And so it just led to this like very succinct moment of clarity where we said, like, we're just going to do this ourselves. And so we quit our six-figure jobs and dove in. And I remember the day so clearly that I decided to do this. After, growing up without financial stability, I had engineered my adult life to be really about stability and having the resources that I needed to take care of myself. And I remember as we talked about this idea and just reflected on what we might do to create change, I thought like I would lose everything for this just to say that, we gave it a shot. This quote from Rebecca Solnit, I think, so beautifully summarizes the feeling that we had in that moment. To hope is dangerous. To hope is to gamble. It's to bet on your futures, on the possibility that an open heart and uncertainty is better than gloom and safety. And so this was, I think, very much the spirit with which we moved forward to create the Coven. So the Coven is a co-working community that is designed for belonging. We offer physical space, professional development resources, and digital tools. We were on a mission to prove another world is possible, to redesign the future of work, to create space for those who have historically felt marginalized in their workplaces and who haven't known the feeling of freedom that comes with true belonging. The problem, we had this great idea, and all these people were really excited that we had been talking to about it. But the problem was that we didn't have any money, which you do need to start a business. And so no one had like a rich uncle, which would have been so fantastic. But that just wasn't in our deck of cards. And so we thought, well, let's use the power of our community to see if we can raise the money that we need to open this business. And so we launched a crowdfunding campaign on a really cool platform called I Fund Women. And sure enough, 3 months later, our community showed up and they raised their hands and they said, we believe in this. This is worthy of our investment. And this is something that we want to see take place in the world. Now, granted, when we were doing this, we didn't have a physical space. We didn't have anything other than like a whole bunch of mood boards and like a really kind of like disjointed pitch deck that we had put together. And so people just felt that this was something that our city deserved and that we needed. We were getting a lot of press around the same time, a lot of press, a lot of pickups. So keep in mind, this is now like 2016, 2017. It's kind of early in Donald Trump's presidency. The Me Too movement is unfolding around us. And so a lot of national press outlets are interested in what we're trying to build. And so, our backgrounds in advertising and PR certainly helped us. But this was really an important part of the story because it got us out to a broader audience and helped to reinforce the idea that this isn't just something that people who work in advertising need, but it's something that people who work in Minneapolis and St. Paul, in states all over the country and all over the world need and are deserving of. So, as I said, the Coven is primarily known for our physical co-working spaces. This is at our Eat Street location, which is just up the street from here. If you've ever been there or if you haven't, we would love to have you. But we're a lot more than just a co-working space. So this is Mayor Melvin Carter of St. Paul, I think the best mayor in the state of Minnesota, I'm just gonna say it. And he came to our grand opening for our St. Paul location and talked about the power of small businesses and of the importance of creating beautiful places that inspire, uplift, and relieve the people who use them. What a lovely way to talk about a co-working space. We're also home to approximately 1 bajillion networking events where we help people meet. We have special interest groups, we have mentoring circles, anything that brings people in community together around shared values and a belief in what can be. This is one of the ways that we signal over and over and over again that you are not alone. We also help historically marginalized entrepreneurs find funding, refine their business ideas. We host a lot of events. This was a pitch showcase where these 3 women walked away with $10,000 to get their businesses off the ground or further them along. Events like this are so important to us because they signal that you have potential. We also name our conference rooms, phone booths, and offices after women who are history makers in their own rights. And this might seem like a small detail, but it's really important to us to remind people that if they could do it, maybe you can too. We source art locally, so if you come to any of our spaces, you'll see a lot of art that reflects the community that our spaces are a part of. We work with local artists and local galleries. We want every member who comes into our space to feel like their identity is reflected on our walls. And this tells people, this communicates that you are seen. We provide beautiful spaces for relaxation. I've kind of already talked about this, but we also give away memberships. So since day one, we've had like a 5-for-1 membership model where for every 5 we sell, we give 1 away to someone in the community to ensure that, everyone has access. Everyone deserves access to spaces like these where they can think and dream and relax in peace. And then last but not least, we equip our members with knowledge, resources, and coaching. We have a vibrant learning platform where we have tons of video content and courses about leadership development, how to run a business, how to grow a business. We choose all of the instructors to be, again, diverse and reflective of the membership base that we serve. So today, the Coven has taken flight and continues to do so. We have more than 1,000 members, 6 locations. We're in 2 different states and growing. We have a learning platform, a pop-in job board, and even an occasional celebrity sighting. So it's really fantastic to see people like this come through our space to celebrate reproductive rights, to talk about issues that we hold near and dear. But I would say that, I think our members that we see every day are just as important as folks like Ilhan and the vice president. So I'm going to leave you with this notion about belonging. Obviously, I'm a bit of a belonging junkie myself, but I do think that belonging makes us unstoppable. And I see how that unfolds in my business and in my space every day. Another world really is possible. And even if affecting change has to start small, it has to start somewhere. And so I thank you all for being here. And yeah, with that, Sanjeet, I'll turn it back over to you. Oh, if you want to get in touch with me, please email me. I'm really glad that I didn't choose to end my presentation with a photo of myself. Wouldn't that have just been terrible if it was just now? Ugh. Anyway, do you want? We can just share this. Well, sure.
Despite all the, oh, there you go. All right. Well, that was fantastic, and it was great to see everything from your high school transcripts, which is wild. That's great that you're actually keeping those things. I think one of the questions that I want to start off with is it seems in many ways that we're living in this moment right now where there's a little bit of a swing arm, kind of where compared to where we were, say, in the summer of 20, where post the murder of George Floyd, there was just this overwhelming kind of support for thinking about issues regarding BIPOC support. And it seems like right now we're seeing this moment, and also in kind of alignment with the presidential elections and some broader discussions and SCOTUS rulings for higher education. Are you seeing a pullback towards from supporters? Are you seeing that tension or that fear within what you're doing now, and how are you responding to that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and certainly I think we are more aware of how we talk about things. So we do a lot of work with corporate partners, and a lot of them have had DEI budget slashed and things like that. And so part of our language around being a company about the future of work is designed to be inclusive, really, of everybody. And so I think our programming, our events, our membership will always reflect the historically marginalized groups of folks that we intend to serve first. But it does call into question, how do we think about ideas of inclusion, and how do we create spaces of belonging where truly everyone can be part of it? I think the pendulum swing that you mentioned is very real. And so we try to take a long view of time, knowing that this is another blip in a radar, in a trend line that's largely moving in the right direction. But yeah, it certainly is. It feels very different from when things were unfolding in 2020, for sure.
And I do want to make sure that we'll get out to questions that folks have too, and I'll keep an eye on how we're doing with time. I wonder if you wanted to talk a little bit about the Coven's expanding, right? Yeah. So you want to talk a little bit about expansion, where it is now, where do you want it to go?
Yeah. So we, a year and a half ago, decided to be a franchise, which I think is weird because most people are like, well, that's like Taco Bell or like Great Clips. But franchising, which is obviously a little bit different than what we do, but franchising is actually an incredibly impactful model for putting entrepreneurial possibilities into the hands of people who maybe wouldn't otherwise have them. And so what we've done is created a playbook for here's how we build our own unique community. People have to take responsibility to build their own unique communities, and we only work with franchisees who we feel our values align to us. But it's different. You know, we would get emails like every week from people all over the country that would say, "Hey, when are you coming to Kansas City?" Or, you know, "When are you coming to Portland?" And so after enough of those, we thought like, well, if we could just help people do this in their own town, like that seems like the best way to expand. The coven has to be of the community that it belongs to, and we don't know what Portland needs. We know what Minneapolis needs and what St. Paul needs. And so the idea of putting ownership into the hands of the people who will create the change was for us really exciting.
And, and how do you, I mean, you've talked a lot about belonging, but obviously there are larger entities like WeWorks that are out there too. Um, um, do you do you compare yourself to them? Do you offer just kind of a completely different kind of vantage point? You and I have never really talked about WeWorks or whatever else or the other spaces. But I guess what I'm interested in knowing is, do you find allyship in similar types of co-working spaces and not others? And yeah.
That's a really interesting question. I do think that we, you know, apart from it being like you could come here to work, that's sort of where the similarities stop. And so we have a lot of members who have never used a co-working space, or maybe they were at WeWork or Industrious. But it's honestly, it's less a part of our kind of what we think about now than it probably was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I think co-working is sort of come into its own. People have a much better understanding of it, and the resources that we offer. Like we always joke, like we never wanted to open a co-working space. How did this happen? But what we wanted to do was create a beautiful physical environment where people could have access to the kinds of resources that we offer. And so certainly a lot of people come and work in our spaces every day, but I think it's really a lot of the other stuff that surrounds it that's kind of the special sauce.
And are there alumni of the coven that you've seen now that have started to kind of go out and do things on their own that you could point out?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We've had a lot of, not well, a lot. We've had a handful of folks like meet their co-founder. It's just like sitting, like someone was like, "Oh, do you have a charger?" And then they ended up starting a business together months later. We've, you know, had activists sitting next to like VPs of banks, and they kind of figure out how to work together. So these you get like bits and pieces of these stories that sound like too incredible to be true. But I think again, it's a testament to when you lead with values and when people are able to identify like I want to be a part of this because I believe the same thing that you do. It really sort of self-selects the right people to be together to make magic happen.
Right. Um, Before I open up to questions from everyone else, but one more question, and I think this relates to the kind of MCAT experience, which is um, there can be that tension between the kind of poetics of creativity and the practicality of leadership, right? The kind of this notion of thinking about the sky as the limit and ideation, and at the same time thinking about the vagaries of leadership where you're looking at employee management or having to eliminate someone's, or to go ahead and have to deal with a profit and loss statement. And I guess I'm wondering how you personally have had to kind of navigate this. Where do you see kind of the joy? What are the things that you're doing just to kind of get it over with versus kind of like where you see that tension potentially being productive and meaningful?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's so many exciting parts of the business. And then there's the stuff that you mentioned, which is like, it just sucks. And no one looks forward to doing it. I think we always try to show up as the leaders that we didn't feel like we had in our careers. And so centering people's humanity and like, if we do have to let someone go, how can we do it in a way that feels like it has given them the softest landing possible and that we have honored their contributions to us. And that doesn't happen often at all. But in those moments, we really try to think about how do we want to look back on this 5 years from now and know that we showed up with integrity according to our values in the spirit of community, in the spirit of collaboration. And it's slower and it's more frustrating because a lot of feelings are involved. But I think discomfort is like maybe the best indicator that you're creating change. And so we try to lean into it, even though it's not, for sure, not always easy.
Great. All right, I'm going to make sure that there's time to open it up for questions if you have them. I can keep going. I can keep going. Okay. Well, I'll keep going, and then if you have questions, just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll make sure to get to you.
We'll just throw a mic to you.
We will not lob a mic at you. I'm going to disagree with Bethany on that one. I guess kind of another question I have for you is about the pandemic, because you opened up a co-working space before the pandemic, and I'm interested in knowing, you had a period of time where I assumed if you didn't completely shut down, you went into these significant kind of restrictions. What did you learn personally during that time, but also what do you think the organization learned during that time?
Yeah, it was, I mean, for all of us, it was obviously like a time. But the day that we had to shut down, 24 hours later, we had kind of spun up a digital platform where we were like, we're just going to host events where people can get together. And this was before everyone was like, not another Zoom meeting. This was like week 1, so no one was sick of Zoom yet. But we would just kind of log on and like hold space to talk about how people were doing. And if people were like, I'm going to like freak out on my kids because I've been homeschooling them, we would talk about that. And it allowed us the space to create the digital platform that I was talking about, where it felt like creating content and getting content, really high quality content, into people's hands is a super important thing to be able to do, and to not have it be dependent on physical space was something that the pandemic allowed us to unlock. I don't know that we would have worked with such urgency to create that kind of an offering if not for the pandemic. And then obviously when George Floyd was murdered, we turned, so at the time we had a location in the North Loop, and it was closed because of pandemic restrictions, but we turned it into a drop site. And so people were funneling literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of food, toiletries, supplies. The Coven was a drop site, and we were just loading car after car after car for weeks, and we would just send it out into the community. And so I think those were the types of moments and events that like there's no way to plan for them. You wish that you didn't have to do that, but you realize we have a tool and an asset that we can use in any number of ways. And so how do we apply our creativity to what might make an impact in the moment that we're in, even if it's nothing like what we thought we would be doing?
Any sure questions out there? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's all you.
Okay, so how might students get ready to do the kind of work that you could do at the Coven? MCAD students in particular.
That's a great question. The question was, how might students get ready to do the kind of, MCAD students get ready to do the kind of work that we do? And you mean like start your own business?
Either start your own business or participate in the model in some way, as a member or as a community member.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So for folks who might be interested in just like being at the Coven, you should either just join, buy a membership, or you should apply to our community funded membership if it's not affordable to you. We always have like positions that come open and stuff. So if you wanted to like just start working at the Coven, just give us a few months, and I'm sure we would have something. As we grow really quickly, we would probably have something there as well. So keep an eye out if this sounds like it's appealing. In terms of getting ready to start a business, and I'll speak my experience in the creative entrepreneurship program, I think just taught a sense of like staying really nimble and flexible, and optimistic about things. So being an entrepreneur is just like every day getting kicked in the face and like just smiling through it, and I think being at MCAD really taught me that like the world is full of beauty and possibility if you look for it. And so we talk a lot about the Coven in terms of like yet. And over the course of my work with the organization, we've raised millions of dollars to grow and expand the business. And all of that came with like, well, we haven't raised $1 million. We don't know what we're doing. And then I was like, we haven't done that yet. And then sure enough, one day we did it, and I think that idea that like yet, we just haven't done it yet, we just haven't figured that out yet, really fuels us, and I think is a great mindset to be in if you want to start your own thing. Thanks, that was a great question.
Okay. Other questions out there? Yeah.
Um, Beth, what is something, so you set out to create this place, it would be a sense of belonging, check, check, like you've done that in spades. What is something unexpected that you're really proud of that you view as sort of like an unexpected, successful thing that you never imagined when you started?
Yeah, okay, so Anne's question was something unexpected that I could not have imagined. Oh, that's a really difficult question. You know, I'm going to turn it inward just a little bit. So, myself and my three business partners, and I didn't talk very much about them, but I have three business partners and we're all equal parts of the business. And we've been operating the business for like going on 7 years. And I think so often you hear nightmare stories about people and the people that they ended up starting businesses with. And I have to tell you, like, these three women are phenomenal. We have been through a lot of twists and turns, a lot of really hard and uncomfortable conversations, and the way that they show up for me and the way that we try to show up for each other has just been like so affirming of what people can do when they really care and they really hold each other in high regard. And so I didn't expect to care about that. And sometimes they really make me angry. Like, I'll be like, oh my God, I'll be talking to my husband. I'll be like, oh my God, listen to this shit. But then I'm like, man, but they're just still the best people. They're the best people I've ever met. So yeah, that's maybe an unexpected fun part of it.
I love it. Thanks.
There's a question over here. Yeah.
Yeah. From like a marketing standpoint, when you were in school, what sort of like messaging did you receive that like, because you said you were interested in photography.
Yeah.
What sort of made you switch to think about like going towards the entrepreneurial track as opposed to like strictly getting an art degree?
Yeah, I was talking to Kyle in the booth about this before the talk started. Well, there's a couple things. One, I was like, I'm going to be so bad at being broke if I don't like succeed wildly as an artist. And then the second immediate thought is like, I don't think I'm probably good enough to succeed as just like a fine artist. And that's not like, oh, poor me. That was like, we got to have self-awareness. And I had spoken with some folks from the creative entrepreneurship department, and it just sounded exciting to me. Like the idea that, there's all this hands-on service learning in the community and that you're collaborating with people and kind of figuring stuff out was like, oh, that sounds awesome. So it was sort of a combination of things. But I think part of it was seeing the talent that was here, and you sort of realize like, I'm gonna have to overcome a mountain, to kind of like hang with the photographers here. And I have some friends who are incredible artists who have made their way in the art world, and I, am in awe of what they do every day.
Can I ask you, I mean, pivoting back to kind of the broader notion of kind of maybe where you want to see the Coven in 5 years, but I guess I'm wondering, what do you think is something that you get that no one else gets about the future of work?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that that doing it differently really is possible. I think a lot of people just feel like, well, we kind of have to keep doing it the same way, and that's not true. And I talked about like discomfort and grappling. They often feel like failure, but I really think that there's signals that we are living at the edge of our imagination. And for the future of work to unfold in a way that is at all meaningful, we have to kind of continue to live in that space of like, what does leadership look like if we think of it in an unconventional way? What does running the business day to day feel like if we try to do it differently? And so I think that idea of maybe like experimentation and risk. I don't know. That was a long answer, a long and bad answer.
That was great. That was great. I want to make sure. Yeah, Jake.
As you sort of grew or sort of scaled up in terms of either funding opportunities or just structural kind of reorganization, were there ever points where you were encouraged or felt encouraged to do things that maybe went a bit counter to the mission, and how you as, you and your co-creators, like how did you kind of address that and figure out when to say no to something or when to, agree to a point that maybe is more financially lucrative, say, but is funded by, a bank that is really racist or something like that? I mean,
Yeah, that's a great question. So were there moments that felt like deal breakers along the way, but that could have led to a lot of financial success? There was only one that I recall, and it's funny that you mentioned WeWork earlier. So before WeWork like kind of went belly up, they had an investment arm where they would make venture capital investments into other businesses, oftentimes co-working spaces. And I remember one of my business partners and we flew out to New York for a meeting with one of the WeWork investors, and we were at one of their headquarters locations in the city, and he was like giving us a tour, and they were gonna like IPO, and he's like, it's like a $34 billion company or whatever, which like it definitely was not. It for sure was not. And but we were there, and we were like, wow, this is it's incredible. It's this beautiful space. They have all this money. They were really interested in what we were doing. And we were like, we wouldn't take this guy's money. And then sure enough, he emailed us and he was like, we don't want, and we were like, we said no first. Like, we were like, we would absolutely not ever take a dime from you. We said it first. But yeah, that was like a feeling where it was like, oh, this is incongruent with our values. And you don't want a shark like that, like mucking up your stuff.
That's great. And I'm glad that went back to our earlier conversation about WeWorks. I'm wondering, especially for this audience, is there something you wished you got from your MCAD education that you didn't get? Something that you wished would have helped kind of you, just if you're able to go ahead and do a little bit of reflection, whether it's a skill or an opportunity or something that you wished you had had that would have been helpful as you entered out and went about your career journey.
Yeah, I did a little bit. So when you were at the time, like if you were in the entrepreneurial studies or creative entrepreneurship program, you had to do some studio classes. And I remember I did like graphic design 1 and 2, and I did typography. And I was fine at those things, but I wish that I would have spent more time painting and drawing and doing some of those things, because I think that's the stuff that like in adulthood, if you're not a practicing artist or you don't dedicate time to doing those things, they just kind of disappear. But they're really special experiences and really important experiences to have. And so I don't think that's like the school didn't plan for that. I think I didn't feel like it was maybe as important at the time as I feel like it is looking back.
Helpful. Any other questions? You're going to talk about the giveaway, right?
Yeah. Hey, Nick. Is Nick here? Nick has the bowl. Without Nick, we have nothing. Oh, the bowl. Okay. I was like, I don't know, guys. No one's getting anything. Okay. So here's the deal. First of all, did everybody get a raffle ticket who wants one? Excellent. Here's the deal. If you win a Coven membership and you're like, I really don't want this, I won't take that personally, and you can transfer it to anybody that you want to. So if you win, just come see me after, and then we'll get you all set up. Or be like, I won this and I don't want it, and I'm going to give it to someone who does. Okay. Can we do this?
Yeah, let's just do it.
This is at random. There's no special. None of this is rigged. Okay. I feel like me saying that makes you all believe that that's probably not true. Okay. So the number is 438. I bet they're all 438. 438 9649.
9649. Someone here has that number.
Okay.
Tension's unbearable.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, let's go. How do you feel?
It's my girlfriend's birthday, so.
Come on. Hero. You did a good job. You can return whatever else you got her.
I didn't say you got anything.
Yeah, so will you just swing up and say hi after, and then I'll get your contact info and everything? Okay, love it.
I really can't begin to tell you how important it's been to have you here and be part of this conversation. I know we'll have you back in different ways here at MCAD, but really great to have you share your insights and what you're seeing in terms of as a reflection of your MCAD experience, but also just what you're doing in the world. So really grateful. So thank you. Let's give it a round of applause.
Thanks, everybody.